Have you ever been absolutely certain about something only to discover that you were completely wrong? Let's look at these images. Did you have to do a double take on a few of those? Was it a skull or were there two little girls playing? So, just as our eyes can trick us, our minds can lock onto certain beliefs while being blind to alternatives. Hello, I'm Dr. RB. I'm a licensed Jungian trained psychologist in the state of Florida and New York. And today we're going to explore how proper logic can help us see the full picture and avoid the traps of flawed thinking. So let's explore perception. You can usually tell a lot of someone's perception by really paying close attention to the words that they use. So let me share this story from my practice, from a client. I'll call her Maria. She came to me stressed about her career, and what she said was, I have to stay in this job I hate because changing careers after 40 is impossible. And when I started listening to her closely, I got a really good idea of the perception that she had based on the assumptions that she was making. So it was the assumptions that she made that really shared a lot with me. So let's break it down. She believed that age determines career mobility because changing careers after 40 is impossible. And you see, a lot of the times, these beliefs, which are assumptions, we assume them to be true. They're usually thoughts that we've had over a long period of time that gets converted into a belief. And then when we make statements out of that belief system, those are the assumptions that we assume. So it's so important to catch these when someone is talking about something, especially if they're feeling very emotional about it. So, a way that I challenge these assumptions when I'm working with clients is I do this by asking questions. And this is something that you could ask yourself. So, a question that I would have is, so you're telling me that because you're over 40, it's just impossible? You can never get another job? You always have to stay in this job that you hate? So that would be a question mirroring what she's telling me. If she's unconscious about that, in other words, she hasn't really thought it through, she'll probably react with, yeah, maybe I'm really not that stuck, or maybe it's really not impossible. But if she's really holding on to that belief and that assumption, she's going to fight me a little bit on that. And that's where I will then ask for evidence. Where have you seen this? Have you seen anyone after 40 actually able to change careers? And of course, we know that many people after 40 have started new careers, and so that's something that I would do is I would ask them for evidence if they're really holding on to that. If they're really holding on to that and they're fighting you, that's because they consciously have made the decision to buy into that. Another one is when you hear, well, that's just how things are. And it's interesting because I live part of the year in Galicia, northern Spain, and here the culture is very traditional. They have a whole history of culture, which is part of the beauty of Galicia and being here. That's one of the things that attracted me to come and live here. But because they have such a strong tradition, one of the things is exactly that. I hear this all the time here, which is, well, that's just how things are. That's how we've always done it. Even though I know that there's a much better way or much more efficient or simple way of doing something. And then I've also challenged that thinking. And I'll say something like, well, says who? Who says that that's just the way things are? Or who says that's how you have to do it? Most of the time, it's because it's always worked and no one wants to do anything different because they don't want to deal with it not working, whatever that it is. And so these are times where I have to think, okay, do I let it go? Or do I just, do it a different way and then teach them that there's another way of doing that? So I've done both parts of that while living here. And what you want to do is you want to challenge these assumptions and you want to give them evidence that there's other ways of doing this or that might not be true, what they are perceiving or holding on to. So let's also examine another debate that I've been dealing with a lot, which is working from home or having to go to an office to work. And here I want to show you that there are strong arguments for this and weak arguments. A strong argument would sound like this: remote work increases productivity because studies show 20% higher output. There's also measurable reduction in sick days, and there's documented cost savings in office space, so the company doesn't have to lease office space. Now, all of these are verifiable. Okay. A weak argument could be, well, office work is better because that's how we've always done it. People seem happier. My friend says so. I heard it on the news. I heard it on television. So again, that would be more of a weaker argument. So stronger arguments are usually based on either research or findings or things like that. And weaker arguments, it's just, I heard it from someone. I just kind of believe that that's how it is. So again, it's basing it on an assumption or a belief, which usually takes time to build up. So in these types of cases, you want to really look at the evidence. And when you look at the evidence or what they're basing it on, you want to ask yourself, is it measurable? Is it verifiable? Can I verify it? Anyone else verify it? It has to be multiple verifiable sources. And also, is it relevant to the argument? Another one is logical connection. So does A actually lead to B? Okay, this happened. It's usually like cause and effect. So does A lead to B? Are there missing steps? Maybe it went to C and back to A. Could there be other explanations for the outcome? And then something that's so important is we really want to look at some fallacies. And these are 3 common fallacies that we see in modern discourse, especially when you're listening to the news or things like that. One of them, it's translated to the person, which means instead of looking at the evidence, you're looking at the person that's telling you the evidence. For example, and it's called ad hominem, for those of you that have studied logic. And a way of hearing this is, don't listen to her health advice. She's not perfect herself. Or if someone brings you a health advice based on research and studies, but maybe that individual doesn't look as healthy, then you discount everything because of that individual. That's what this one would look like. So you want to always evaluate the advice or the scientific research or the argument based on its own merits and not based on the person telling you. Another fallacy is false dichotomy. So this is when someone presents an argument and they usually talk about either or. So either we work 60 hours a week or the company fails. Either this dramatic thing happens or this happens. And they present it like either A or B. So again, it's like there's no other options. So another way of looking at this would be to consider multiple solutions and see if there's a middle ground. In Jungian psychology, we always talk about polarities. So polarities would be 2 things that bring tension. So this problem, and there's some tension. And one might feel like you have to either do this or you have to go over here. And if you go over here, you're faced with this other problem. If you go over here, it's this other problem. But according to Carl Jung, you need to look at Well, maybe there's another option. Maybe there's a third option. Maybe there's a middle ground, something that comes up from the middle, or what they call transcendent function. And the names are really not important. It's really more about when you're faced with this type of approach, it's good to give it some time and see if something else arises, if there's another path that maybe you weren't aware of that becomes clear. You also hear arguments where it's basically an appeal to authority or someone that you think has authority. Like, this celebrity says this diet cures everything. Well, I'm going to follow that because this celebrity, it's the celebrity status, the authority status, that is what I'm going to follow. Instead of looking for peer review research or maybe experts that have some consensus around that. And this is usually a good approach when you are looking at problems relating to health, whether it's physical health, mental health, even spiritual health. I guess you could also look at that. In the last decade or so, we have really been, what's the word I'm looking for? We've been kind of discounting professionals and experts, almost as if the experts and the professionals really don't know what they're talking about. And that can be very dangerous. And that's something that I see a lot. So I had one experience where a client said to me, I don't care how many degrees you have. I don't care how many initials you have after your name. I just don't believe you. I don't think you know what you're talking about. And if someone does that, then there's really nothing I could do for them. So one of the things I remember saying to this person after, just listening to them kind of, go off on that assumption or belief system, I said, okay, so if that is your belief, then it seems like there's nothing I can do to change that. So I think you need to solve this on your own. I think you need to just deal with it on your own and don't come back. And that person was like so surprised that I said that because they didn't think I was going to say that. And then their next response is, so you don't want to work with me? You're kicking me out? Then they went to that. And I said, no, I'm not kicking you out. And I'm not saying I don't want to work with you. But in order for us to work together, you have to acknowledge that I'm bringing something to the table. You're paying me money because I'm just here kind of giving you some, things that come off the top of my head, or because I have experience and I've studied this and I have a degree and I'm licensed by the state to do this work. If you're going to throw that away and say it doesn't mean anything, then I don't know how I can help you. So I just wanted to kind of bring that in as a little tangent maybe, but I think it's important because I think nowadays, people are either, like I said earlier, they're either looking at an authority, like usually a celebrity or somebody that really doesn't have experience or they don't have the expert knowledge, and then they're getting rid of the one that does have the experience and the expert knowledge. Anyway, I think I won't say too much else about that because otherwise I'm gonna get on my soapbox. Maybe that'll be another video. And so, for example, if you are analyzing or looking at a social media post and you hear something like or read something like, if you don't share this post and you don't care about whatever the cause is, or you don't care about me if it's personal, and then there's definitely a fallacy here at play. And the fallacy is that they are giving you a dichotomy. So they're basically saying you got to share this post or this bad thing will happen to you, or you don't care about me, or you don't care about the whales or little dogs, whatever the case may be. So it's like either or, and it's forcing you to make a decision, right? And so that's something that you have to kind of look at that and say, okay, so this is a fallacy here at play and it's a dichotomy. So I'm not going to fall into that trap. There's also emotional manipulation here by saying you don't care about me, you don't care about the dolphins or the little puppies. And there's also this generalization. So anyone that doesn't share this post doesn't care about me, doesn't care about the puppies. So you see, these are all different fallacies that come into play because of this argument. So let's look at some daily checkpoints just to kind of help us with this. A rule that I have is that before I share news, I want to ask myself, are there any assumptions that I'm making? If I read a piece of news and I have a strong reaction to the news, whether it's positive or negative, that's usually a good indicator that I have an assumption or I have a belief at play here, that I'm not being neutral and I'm definitely not being objective. So, a good question to ask if I come across a piece of news that really pushes my buttons, I want to then go deeper and say, okay, why are my buttons being pushed? What are some assumptions? What are some beliefs that I have? What is the perception that this is based on? So these are some questions you can ask. Especially if you're having a conversation with someone and they bring about a piece of news or a strong statement on that. And even the news, when you are looking at a title of a news or listening to the news, you want to catch what are some assumptions that are being communicated in that piece of news. And it's very interesting to catch that. That way you can right away tell, okay, the news that I'm hearing has already an assumption attached to it. Therefore, it cannot be objective and it's most likely biased. And if it's biased, it doesn't mean that it's evil or that I need to get rid of it. I just have to understand and accept, okay, this news is biased to maybe this audience or that audience or what have you. Just kind of keep that in mind. So you want to also always, again, and we mentioned this before, look at the evidence behind that. And one of the things that I want to say here, and I know that this is already a little bit of a longer video, is it's so important nowadays to really understand logic, understand how to reason, because what I'm seeing is, especially since they don't teach this in school, which they should, people are confusing what is a fact and what is an opinion. And when I hear people talking, and of course this is my training, I'll hear them say something and I already know that they're saying it because of an assumption or because of a belief. But it doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean it's true. And you catch it. And, my mother, God bless her, and I hope she's not watching this, but I do this a lot with her. She'll say something and then I'll ask her a question because I'm challenging what she's saying. Because see, this is what I believe and this is what I see in my experience, especially in my practice. You don't have to challenge every time someone, because that takes a lot of energy. But if you hear people and they communicate to you an assumption that just is not true, because assumption is not just an opinion that someone has. An assumption is much stronger than that, and a lot of the times assumptions can come across as factual, but they're not. And when I hear something like that, like for example, the client Maria that I mentioned before, when she said that I have to be in this job, I'm stuck here. Right away I'm hearing she's a victim. She doesn't have control over her life. And if I don't challenge that, she can easily go down the path of depression, because depression will bring has to do with hopelessness and helplessness. And someone like that will just go down that path and that's where they end up. And I can't allow that. I mean, part of my profession, we just don't allow it. I mean, if they're in the consultation room in a session, I challenge them. And so when I hear something from people I care about, I like to ask them those questions. I like to ask them, so what you're saying is this, And again, it's very interesting if they're unconscious of what they're saying, because a lot of the times people are, they just say things, either they heard it, they adopted it, they say it, but they haven't really thought it through. That means that they're more conscious. But if they're unconscious, usually when I challenge that, then the response I get is, huh, I never really looked at it that way, or huh. Or they'll even deny that they said it. Oh, I said that? I don't think I said that. Well, yes, you said this, this, and that. And I usually will say it back verbatim. And then the next response is, well, I didn't mean that. Well, then what did you mean? Can we say it a different way? You see? And that's when it's all unconscious. If it's conscious, that means that they have thought it through and they do wholeheartedly believe it. And if that's the case, then usually I get even more pushback and I get someone that just wants to argue. And what I do is I'll say, well, can you show me the evidence? Where is this based on? Where, okay, they'll say, well, I heard it from some. Well, can you find where you heard it from? Can you do a little digging and really see if that's really what you heard? Or maybe where you heard it, you want to check those sources. Maybe it's not reputable. I had another client one time, they told me of some incredible news, and that news was based on some latest medical breakthrough. And when we did the searching together in the session, because they were holding on for their dear life on this assumption, we realized that the institute was not real, it didn't exist, and the person reporting on that was not even a medical doctor. It was, someone that had no medical training, and they were just like an imposter. They were passing off as a doctor. And it was so shocking to this person that they even said to me, it took me a couple days to really grapple that what I read was not true, because I really based so much on that. So just be very careful. In this day of misinformation, a lot of the times we're going to make assumptions, especially if that misinformation matches with what we want out of life, right? And that makes it even more stronger. So I hope you found value in this. I'm Dr. RB. I'm so passionate about helping people develop stronger logical thinking skills as well as develop their intuition. So if you'd like to dive deeper into these concepts, or maybe you want to go deeper and work with me, there'll be a link below where you can go to my website and book a complimentary 15-minute call with me just to kind of see if we're a good fit to work together. So remember, together we can really build a capacity for clear, logical thinking that is so desperately needed in these times that we're in. So until then, please take care. It's Dr. RB. It's such a pleasure that you have taken part of your day to be with me. Take care for now. Bye-bye.